The city woke up early every morning, but she was already awake long before the streets came alive. She sat on the cold steps outside a closed shop, pulling her thin jacket tighter around her body. Hunger had a way of waking her up faster than any alarm. It wasn't sharp anymore. It was dull and familiar, like an old ache that never fully went away. People passed by without looking. Office workers hurried with coffee in their hands. Street vendors prepared their carts. Life moved fast around her, but she stayed still, watching it from the side. She had learned long ago that if she stayed quiet and small, the world would mostly leave her alone. In her bag, she carried very little. A folded sweater, a notebook with worn pages, and a small photo she never showed anyone. The photo showed a man sitting at a grand piano, his head slightly bowed, his hands frozen mid-note. His face held calm and fire at the same time. He was once known everywhere. Concert halls had gone silent when he played. Critics had called him a genius. To her, he was just her father. She rarely looked at the photo anymore. Not because she forgot him, but because remembering hurt too much. His fame had once filled their small home with visitors, praise, and hope. Then, just as quickly, it disappeared. Bad choices, broken promises, and a world that moved on without waiting. When he died, there was no fortune left behind. Only debt, silence, and a daughter who had to grow up too fast. She learned early not to say his name. Saying it brought questions. Questions brought pity or doubt. She didn't want either. She wanted food, rest, and dignity. And dignity was hard to keep when you were always hungry. By late afternoon, sky began to soften, and the streets smelled of cooking food. That smell followed her like a cruel joke. She walked slowly, choosing a familiar path. At the corner of a busy street stood a small restaurant. It wasn't fancy. The sign was faded, and one of the lights always flickered. But inside, there was warmth, and sometimes, if luck was kind, leftovers. She'd been coming there for weeks. Not every day. Just enough that the owner recognized her face, but not enough to feel responsible for her. She waited near the door, pretending to check her phone, though the screen had been cracked for months and held no messages. Inside, laughter bounced off the walls. Plates clinked. People talked loudly, carefree. She stood there for a moment, debating whether to walk away. Pride whispered that she should leave. Hunger shouted louder. She stepped inside. The owner noticed her almost immediately. He was a broad man with tired eyes and a voice that carried across the room. He looked at her clothes, her worn shoes, the way she stood with her shoulders slightly hunched. "You again?" he said, not unkindly, but not gently either. She nodded. "If there's anything left, I can wait." Some customers turned to look. Others didn't care. She kept her eyes low. Waiting had become her skill. The owner sighed and wiped his hands on a cloth. "You know, I can't just feed everyone for free." "I know," she said softly. "I understand." He glanced toward the corner of the room where an old piano sat. It was more decoration than instrument now. Dust covered the top. A few keys were chipped. No one ever played it. A smile crept across his face. Half joke, half challenge. "You play, right? Everyone who comes in here says they can do something special." A few people laughed. Her heart skipped. She shook her head quickly. "No, I didn't say," he waved his hand. "Relax, I'm just saying. Maybe you play us a song, then we'll see about food." The laughter grew louder. Someone clapped as if it were entertainment. The room felt suddenly smaller, tighter. She stood frozen. Her fingers curled slightly, muscle memory waking up without permission. The piano sat there quietly, waiting like it had been waiting its whole life. She hadn't touched a piano in years. Not since the last time she had played alone in a broken apartment with no electricity, her father sitting beside her. Correcting her posture, even when he was already sick, her throat tightened. "I can't," she said. The owner shrugged. "Then I can't help." That was it, simple, fair, even. She turned toward the door, her stomach twisting in pain. As she reached for the handle, Voice inside her whispered something she had been trying to silence for years. "Sit down." She paused. Memories rushed in. Long nights of practice. Her father's quiet nod when she played something right. The way he closed his eyes when the music felt honest. Music had once been the safest place she knew. She turned back. "I'll try," she said. The room went quiet, not because they respected her, but because they were curious. She walked toward the piano, each step heavier than the last. She brushed dust off the bench and sat down slowly. Her hands hovered over the keys. They shook, not from fear of failure, but from fear of remembering who she used to be. She took a deep breath, and then she played. The first note was soft, almost unsure. A few people kept talking. Plates still moved. But then the second note followed, and the third. Something in the air shifted. Her playing wasn't loud. It didn't try to impress. It told a story instead. A story of loss, of long nights and quiet strength. Of a girl who carried a legend in her blood but refused to wear his name. One by one, the room grew silent. Forks paused midair. Conversations faded. Even the owner stopped moving. Her fingers remembered everything. She closed her eyes as the music filled the space. Unaware of the tears forming in the eyes of strangers, unaware that something important had just begun. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't playing for survival. She was playing because the music had never left her. The music settled like a soft wind in the restaurant. She kept her eyes closed, letting the memories guide her hands. Every note carried something she had held in silence for years. Pain, hope, longing, and underneath it all, love for the man who had taught her everything. People watched, mesmerized, unsure what they were witnessing. Some were eating still, but their bites were slower. The conversations had stopped, and the clinking of plates had become a distant echo. It was as if the world had paused for this moment. When she opened her eyes slightly, she noticed the owner leaning against the counter. His jaw was tight, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of respect in his eyes. She hadn't thought anyone would care. She had spent so long feeling invisible that even acknowledgement felt strange. A few customers whispered to each other. One leaned over to another and said, "She plays, like someone famous." The words hung in the air. She did not respond. She did not want attention. She only wanted to finish what she had started. Her fingers moved across the keys with precision, each note clear and alive. She remembered her father's words from years ago. Play like you are speaking without words. Make people feel what you feel. She had never understood fully until now. Outside, the city continued in its hurry, unaware of the quiet miracle taking place inside a small restaurant. A delivery man passed by, pushing a cart of vegetables, and smelled the faint scent of bread and music together. Even the street seemed to pause, just slightly, for the music. The song she played was not one anyone could name. It was a mixture of fragments she had learned from her father, pieces of her own emotion, and notes she had imagined when no one was listening. Every chord told a story. Every pause gave time to think. Even the broken keys had their place, adding a rawness that made the performance more alive. As the song went on, she noticed a little boy sitting with his mother, staring wide-eyed at her hands. He had never seen a piano played like this, not in his school, not on television. His mother smiled quietly, holding his hand, but she too was caught in the moment. It was rare for music to reach so deep into the soul. She didn't know she had that power. Not until now. A man at the back of the room shifted in his chair. He had once been a musician, or at least he liked to believe he had the ear for one. His eyes widened, and he whispered to no one, She knows what she's doing. Truly knows." The laughter from earlier had disappeared entirely. The room was quiet in a way that demanded attention. Even the staff had stopped working, unsure whether to keep taking orders or simply watch. It was as if the piano and the girl had drawn a line between the ordinary world and this one moment, creating a place where only music and feeling existed. Her arms ached slightly, but she ignored it. She had trained herself to endure for hours, sitting at a piano without moving. Now it didn't feel like training. It felt like breathing. The notes were alive, and they needed to be played. A waitress wiping a counter nearby had stopped mid-motion. She leaned in just slightly, curiosity and awe blending on her face. She had seen many people pretend to play, but this was different. This was honest. This was raw. The girl noticed all these things but felt no fear. She felt a calm energy she had not known for years. For a moment, she imagined her father beside her, nodding slightly, a faint smile on his lips. She missed him terribly, but the music allowed her to touch a memory she had thought lost forever. Someone dropped a fork. It clattered against the plate. The sound seemed out of place, almost harsh compared to the fluid melody flowing through the room. Heads turned briefly, then returned to watching her. Even small distractions became part of the rhythm she created. Her stomach grumbled. She had skipped breakfast and lunch, but she ignored it. Hunger was present, but it could wait. The music mattered more. This was a gift, and she was finally sharing it. She had never played for anyone except herself in the past few years. Today was different. The song shifted. Soft notes became bold, and bold notes softened into gentle whispers. She used the broken keys creatively, creating new harmonies she had never dared to try. Her eyes closed again, letting the music lead her. She felt free. For the first time in months, she felt alive. A young woman at a table whispered to her friend, "She's incredible. I've never heard anything like this." The friend nodded silently, almost afraid to interrupt the spell. The owner came closer, watching her hands move. He had been wrong to doubt her. He had thought she was just hungry and desperate. He realized now that she was hungry for something deeper. Recognition. Connection. Maybe both. And for once, he felt honored to witness it. The song ended softly, with a lingering note that hung in the air. Silence followed. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty but full of thought, emotion, and reflection. Everyone was still. No one moved immediately. They were not ready to leave the spell she had created. She opened her eyes slowly. There were faint smiles on some faces, tears in others. No one clapped yet. That would come, but not yet. Not until the moment fully sank in. She felt her heart beat in her ears, the echo of every note still vibrating through her chest. A little girl at the corner whispered to her mother, "Mom, she's magic." Her mother nodded, not trusting her voice to disturb the moment. The owner cleared his throat softly. He didn't need to say much. Just one look, one nod. It was enough. He walked over and quietly said, "Sit. Don't worry about the food. You've earned it." She blinked, unsure whether she heard correctly. Words like these were not part of her reality for a long time. She had been invisible for so long that acknowledgement was almost frightening. But it was true. She had earned something. Not just the food, but respect, attention, place even, if small in the world. She smiled faintly, almost shyly, and nodded. She didn't say anything. No need. The music had said more than words could as she reached for a small plate the owner handed her. She felt a strange lightness. The hunger in her stomach was real, but something else had filled her more. Pride? Relief? Connection. Perhaps all of it. She realized she could survive hunger in ways she had forgotten. Music fed her too. The people in the restaurant began to talk again, softly this time. They didn't return fully to the chatter from before, not yet. Something had shifted. They had witnessed something special, something rare, and they knew it. They could feel it. The little boy clutched his mother's hand and whispered, "I want to play like her someday." She heard him, and it made her heart swell. Maybe he would. Maybe he could. The thought that music could inspire someone else, like her father had inspired her, made her stomach ache with happiness. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel like a shadow. She felt seen, even if only for a moment. And in that fleeting moment, she remembered why she loved the piano, why she had continued despite everything. Music was not just an escape. It was life itself, the very thing that gave her strength to move forward, to face hunger, to face the world. She finished her meal quietly, savoring every bite, every crumb. The restaurant was no longer a place of survival. It had become a space where music and humanity met, where a young woman could share a piece of her soul without fear. The piano still stood in the corner, waiting for her next touch, waiting for her next story. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or the next day, or the day after that, but she knew she could face it. She had found her voice again, not just in words, but in notes, and that voice, once awakened, could not be silenced. Not by hunger, not by doubt, not by fear. The next day, she woke with the memory of yesterday lingering in her mind. The restaurant, the soft murmurs of the crowd, the faint echo of applause that had never commit, was all vivid. She sat quietly in her small rented room, her hands resting on her lap. Remembering the way the piano had felt beneath her fingers, she felt a strange combination of fatigue and exhilaration, like she had run a marathon in her soul rather than her legs. The streets outside were busy again, carrying the same smell of bread and smoke, the same sounds of car horns and footsteps. Yet she walked differently this morning. Her head was higher, her shoulders a little straighter. Hunger had not vanished, but something else had filled the emptiness inside her. A sense of possibility, fragile but real, pulsed through her. She made her way to the restaurant once more, unsure if anyone would remember her. The door creaked as she entered. The owner looked up from a pile of receipts and paused. His eyes widened, not with surprise, but with recognition, and he gave a small nod. No words were needed. Inside, the room smelled of fresh bread and coffee. The few patrons who were present looked at her curiously. Some whispered to each other. One young man leaned toward the woman sitting next to him and said, "That girl. She played here yesterday. Incredible, wasn't it?" She smiled faintly, but said nothing. She had learned that words could complicate things. Music, on the other hand, could speak without explanation. She moved toward the corner where the piano sat. It seemed to wait patiently for her arrival, as if it knew she would come. Her fingers hovered over the keys. The piano had been silent for so long that a thin layer of dust had settled on its surface. She brushed it away with her sleeve and took a deep breath. Hunger still gnawed at her stomach, but the thought of playing again made her pulse quicken. She pressed the first key. A soft note that trembled slightly, like a question posed to the world. The room quieted instinctively. People paused their conversations, sensing that something was about to unfold. She closed her eyes and let her memory guide her hands. Each note she played carried yesterday's emotion and today's anticipation. Blending into something raw and living, her mind drifted back to her father. She remembered the hours he spent teaching her, the way he corrected her posture, the gentle nods and encouraging words. She remembered the pride in his eyes when she hit a chord perfectly, the quiet satisfaction when she understood a melody intuitively. Those memories fueled her fingers, giving them a strength that she hadn't known she still possessed. A few customers were new faces. Strangers who had never heard of the girl who played for food. They stopped mid-bite, staring, captivated by the elegance of her movements and the depth of her music. Even those who came regularly were drawn in, unable to resist the magnetic pull of her performance. The song she played today was different from yesterday's. It was softer at first, almost hesitant, then it grew bolder, exploring emotions she had tucked away. Each note seemed to tell a story that words could not capture. The melody twisted and turned, rising and falling, carrying listeners along on an unseen journey. A middle-aged man sitting near the window placed his hand over his heart. He had seen many concerts, heard many talented musicians, but nothing touched him like this. The purity, the honesty, the depth of emotion. It was as though she was playing not for applause, but for life itself. He felt tears prick his eyes and quickly wiped them away, embarrassed to be so moved. She opened her eyes slightly and noticed a young woman holding a sketchbook. She was drawing quickly, inspired by the rhythm and flow of the music. Lines and shapes appeared on the paper in fluid motion, capturing the essence of the notes and the emotions they stirred. The girl felt a thrill. Her music was not only her dit, was seen, interpreted, transformed by another creative soul. Outside the window, a pigeon landed on the ledge, tilting its head as if listening. The small details of the world seemed sharper today, clearer. She felt connected not just to the piano, but to the entire room, to the people, to life itself. Her hunger, her struggles, her pain, they were real, but they did not define her. Music did. The song shifted again, becoming more playful, a soft dance of notes that made a few children giggle quietly in the corner. Their laughter was like a ripple through the melody, weaving human warmth into the music. She allowed herself a tiny smile, her first of the day. Feeling the joy of simple connections, the owner had returned behind the counter, watching without interruption. He had seen many things in his life, but this was rare. He felt a deep respect, almost reverence, for the young woman who had taken nothing but a chance and transformed it into something beautiful. He wondered if she knew just how extraordinary she was as the final notes approached. Her fingers moved more delicately, almost reverently. The room held its breath. People forgot their meals, their conversations, their schedules. For a few minutes, the world outside did not exist. Only the piano, the music, and the girl in front of it remained. She ended the piece softly, letting the last note linger in the air. The silence that followed was thick, full of unspoken admiration. No one clapped immediately. They simply absorbed the experience, letting it sink deep into their hearts. The impact was quiet but undeniable. A young boy approached her cautiously, holding a small toy. I've never heard music like that, he whispered. How do you do it? She knelt slightly, offering a gentle smile. I just listen, she said softly, and I let my heart play. The boy nodded slowly, as if he understood more than her words conveyed. His eyes shone with curiosity and wonder, a reflection of the impact she had on the people around her. The owner finally spoke, his voice low but filled with warmth. Take your time today. No need to worry about the food. You've earned your place here, even if only for a little while. She nodded, feeling a deep gratitude. It was not just the food, it was recognition, respect, and a connection she had longed for without realizing it. The restaurant had become more than a place to survive. It was a stage, a refuge, a place where music and life intertwined. As she sat there, eating slowly and savoring the warmth of the meal, she realized something important. Her father's legacy was not just in his name or his fame, it was in her hands, her heart, and her courage to play. She carried it forward, not for others to notice, but because it was hers. It was alive, and it demanded to be shared. The room slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Conversations resumed, laughter returned, plates clinked. But the memory of the music lingered. People would carry it with them long after they left. A quiet reminder that even in unexpected places, beauty could appear and touch lives in ways they never imagined. She left the restaurant later, walking back to her small room. The streets were noisy, crowded, and chaotic, but she felt a calm within her. She had touched something important, and it had touched her back. Hunger would return, challenges would continue, but she had found a new strength. Music had reminded her of who she was, and for the first time in a long time. She believed that she could survive, maybe even thrive. The days that followed were both ordinary and extraordinary. She returned to the restaurant almost every afternoon, not out of need, but because the piano called to her in ways nothing else could. Each time she sat at the worn bench, the music seemed to flow easier, stronger, deeper. Her fingers remembered the rhythm, the emotion, the stories that had lived in her heart for so long. The owner began to treat her differently. His words were fewer now, but his gestures showed care. A cup of tea appeared without asking. A small plate of bread sometimes set aside for her. He didn't say it aloud, but she could feel his respect. He had witnessed a talent that could not be ignored, even if it had come in a form he had not expected. Word began to spread slowly. People told friends, friends told others. Soon, the restaurant was not just a place for meals, but a place to see the girl who could make a piano sing. Visitors came from nearby neighborhoods, curious to hear the music that seemed to fill the air with more than sound. They did not come for food or drink, they came for an experience, a glimpse of something magical. One afternoon, an older man came in quietly and sat at the back, observing her as she played. He had a sharp look in his eyes and carried himself with a calm authority. He was clearly someone who had seen much in life, perhaps a musician, perhaps a critic, perhaps both. She didn't know who he was, but she sensed that his attention was different from the casual interest of others. As she played, noticed him nod slightly, almost imperceptibly. It was subtle, but it made her heart skip. Recognition from someone who understood music in its deepest sense was rare. She had been seen and admired for her father's name before, but this felt different. This was acknowledgement of her own hands, her own soul, her own story. The restaurant was quieter that day than usual. The few people present were absorbed, listening with full attention. Even the regular chatter of the kitchen seemed to soften. Her music wrapped around the room like a warm embrace. She no longer played for food or survival. She played because the music needed to be heard, because she needed to speak. As she finished one piece, the older man stood and approached her carefully. His steps were slow, deliberate, respectful. When he reached the piano, he looked at her, his eyes searching, then settled on the piano keys as if they had a story of their own. "You play beautifully," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Do you know who I am?" She shook her head slightly, unsure whether she wanted to. She had learned long ago that fame and recognition could complicate everything. "I am a music teacher," he said simply. "I've heard many young musicians, many who think they understand the depth of music. Few do. You do. You play with honesty, emotion, and skill. You are not performing for applause. You are telling a story." Her hands froze briefly on the keys. Few words had ever carried such weight. Few people had ever understood her in such a direct way. For a moment she felt exposed, vulnerable, yet recognized in a way she had craved for years. "Your father was a great pianist," the man continued. "I knew him. I attended some of his performances. You carry something of him in your hands, but more importantly, you carry yourself. You are not just his daughter. You are your own musician." She swallowed hard, emotions welling up. It was not just praise. It was validation. It was the acknowledgement that her struggles, her silence, her dedication had not been in vain. For the first time, someone recognized her not as an extension of a legend, but as an individual with talent, heart, and courage. "Would you consider studying further?" he asked gently. "There are opportunities, competitions, and stages that could use someone like you. Not for your father's name, but for your music." She hesitated. Her life had been shaped by survival, by fear of disappointment and failure. The idea of stepping into a larger world was both terrifying and thrilling. She had spent so long hiding, keeping her identity small to protect herself from the harshness of reality. Now someone was offering her a chance to grow, to be seen fully, not just partially, not just in fragments. I don't know," she admitted softly. "I've been out of touch with that world for so long, and I don't want to fail." The man smiled gently. "Failure is part of growth, but hiding forever is not. You have a gift, and it deserves to be shared. Not for fame, not for money, but because it is part of who you are. The world will notice when someone plays like you." She looked down at her hands, remembering the hours of practice, the hunger, the struggle, the quiet tears shed over broken notes in silent rooms. She thought about the empty days, the moments of doubt, the constant need to survive. And she realized that despite all of it, she had found something that no one could take away: her music, her voice, her story. The older man nodded toward the piano. "Play for me again," he said simply. "Not for the audience, not for me. Play for yourself." She took a deep breath and began to play. The notes were different this time, flowing not from obligation, hunger, or recognition, but from a deep well of emotion and experience. The melody was richer, fuller, alive with her own identity. Every note carried a fragment of her past, a glimmer of hope for the future, a testament to resilience. He listened without interruption. His eyes closed briefly, absorbing every nuance, every subtle touch, every quiet pause. He did not offer feedback, critique, or judgment. He simply allowed the music to be, letting it speak freely, letting it breathe. When the final note lingered in the air and faded into silence, she looked up. The man's expression was calm, almost serene. He nodded once, slowly, deliberately. "You are ready," he said. "Ready to step beyond this small world, to explore, to grow, to share your talent on stages that matter. Your father's legacy is not a burden. It is a beginning." Gratitude, fear, hope, excitement, they all mingled, leaving her both overwhelmed and alive. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a life beyond survival. A life where her music could reach hearts and minds. A life where her talent was recognized, not just her name. As the man left the restaurant, he left her with a small note. It contained his contact information, a suggestion of music schools, and an encouragement to consider auditions and performances. She held it tightly, feeling the weight of possibility in her hands. It was more than paper. It was a key to a door she had long thought was closed. The restaurant returned to its usual rhythm. She no longer saw it the same way. It was no longer just a place to play for food. It was a place of transformation, of recognition, of beginnings. She realized that her journey was just starting. The piano, the music, the world outside awaited her contribution, her voice, her courage. As she walked home that evening, she felt the city around her in a new light. The streets seemed less harsh, the crowds less intimidating, the possibilities greater. She understood that talent alone was not enough. Courage, persistence, and the willingness to be seen mattered just as much. And for the first time, she believed that she had all of these in her hands, ready to shape her future. The morning sun shone softly through the dusty window of her small room. She sat quietly on the edge of her bed, the note from the music teacher still clutched in her hand. Her mind replayed the events of the last few days. From her first hesitant notes in the restaurant to the recognition of her own talent. It felt surreal, like a dream she didn't want to wake from, yet the hunger and challenges of her life were still very real. She knew that this was only the beginning. She carefully folded the note and placed it in her notebook, the worn pages filled with sketches, memories, and pieces of music she had composed over the years. Each page held a part of her journey, fragments of a life lived in both shadow and light. Today she felt ready to take the next step, uncertain but willing to embrace the unknown. Walking through the busy streets, she noticed the familiar scents and sounds, the smell of fresh bread from a corner bakery, the distant laughter of children playing in an alley, the honking of impatient drivers, but it all felt different now. Her perspective had shifted. She was no longer invisible. She carried with her a newfound confidence, a spark ignited by the recognition of her own abilities. Arriving at the restaurant, she felt a warm sense of anticipation. The owner greeted her with a subtle nod, his eyes reflecting a quiet pride. The regular customers looked up, curious to see what she would play today. Some had come hoping to hear her music again. Others simply wanted to witness the quiet transformation that seemed to follow her. She approached the piano, brushing off the thin layer of dust as she had done before. Her fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly, not from fear but from the weight of possibility. Today she would play not just for survival or recognition, but for herself and for the world she was beginning to imagine. The first note she struck was soft. Almost hesitant, a delicate question posed to the room. As the melody unfolded, it grew in confidence, weaving through the space with grace and emotion. Each note carried her story, her struggles, her resilience, her longing for connection. The music was alive, and it demanded attention. People watched in awe, their daily concerns fading into the background. The young boy from previous days sat with wide eyes, holding his mother's hand tightly. Even the regular patrons, who had grown accustomed to her presence, felt a new depth in her performance. It was as if each note reached into their hearts, speaking words they could not express themselves. The music teacher, seated quietly at the back, observed with a critical yet gentle eye. He had heard talent before, but this was different. She was not merely playing the piano. She was telling her story, communicating her experiences, her pain, her joy, and her hope through the language of music. He could see the potential for greatness, a life beyond the small restaurant, a life that demanded recognition. As the song progressed, she allowed herself to take risks. Her fingers danced across the keys with boldness, creating harmonies she had never dared to attempt. The broken keys became part of the composition, adding a raw, authentic texture to the music. She was no longer bound by fear or doubt. She was free to express herself fully. A hush fell over the restaurant. Even the staff, who had been busy attending to customers, paused to listen. The music filled the space, connecting everyone present in a shared experience. Strangers were drawn together by the emotion, the honesty, and the beauty of her playing. It was a rare moment, one that would linger in their memories long after they left. When the final note faded, profound silence hung in the air. No one moved immediately. They were absorbed in the impact of what they had just witnessed. Slowly, one by one, the applause began, a gentle clapping that grew in strength and intensity. The young boy clapped the loudest, his eyes shining with admiration and wonder. She stood, taking a small bow, feeling the warmth of recognition surround her. It was not just for the music, but for the courage to share her story, to step into the light despite fear and uncertainty. The owner approached, a proud smile on his face. "You've changed this place," he said softly. "You've changed more than you realize." Over the next few weeks, opportunities began to unfold. Invitations to perform at local events, small stages, and community gatherings arrived. She remained cautious, aware that fame could bring both admiration and challenges. But she also realized that she could not hide forever. Her music had a life of its own, power that could not be contained. She practiced diligently, each day refining her skills, exploring new pieces, and experimenting with her own compositions. She discovered a deeper connection to her music, a sense of purpose that went beyond survival or recognition. It was about expression, communication, and the sharing of something profoundly human. The music teacher continued to guide her, offering advice, encouragement, and a structured path to grow. He helped her navigate auditions, performances, and opportunities she had never imagined. Each success, no matter how small, built her confidence and reinforced the belief that she could step fully into her talent. As she performed in larger spaces, she realized that her journey was about more than her own success. It was about honoring the legacy of her father, not by mimicking him, but by embracing her unique voice. She began to understand that true talent is not inherited, it is nurtured, it's cultivated, and expressed with honesty. The restaurant remained a special place for her. It was where her journey had begun, where her music had first been recognized, and where she had found the courage to believe in herself. She returned whenever she could, playing for those who had first supported her, sharing the gift that had transformed her life. Her story spread quietly at first, then more broadly. People admired not only her skill, but her resilience, her humility, and her dedication. She became an inspiration to many, a reminder that talent can emerge even in the most unexpected circumstances, and that perseverance and courage can transform lives. Through it all, she remained grounded. She never sought fame for its own sake. She sought only to express herself, to connect with others through music, and to honor the journey that had brought her to this point. Each performance was a testament to her growth, her struggles, and her unwavering dedication. Years later, she would look back on those early days in the small restaurant and smile. The hunger, the uncertainty, the fear, all of it had shaped her into the musician and the person she had become. The piano had been her companion, her teacher, and her voice, when words failed, she had played for food, for survival, and for recognition. But ultimately, she played for something greater, for herself, for the world, and for the music that lived within her. Her journey was a reminder that true talent cannot be hidden, that courage can overcome fear, and that even in the most unlikely places, greatness can emerge. Even after the recognition and opportunities she had received, her journey was far from over. Each day brought new challenges and new lessons, reminding her that growth was an ongoing process. She woke early one morning, the sunlight filtering through the window and casting gentle shadows across her room. She sat on the edge of her bed, stretching her hands, Feeling the familiar tension and anticipation that always came before she played, she packed her notebook, pencils, and a few personal items, preparing for another day of performance and practice. Even with her growing reputation, she remained grounded. Fame had not changed her. It had only given her more chances to share her music and connect with people. Today she planned to visit a community center where children gathered to learn music, hoping to inspire them as she had once been inspired. The streets were alive with activity. Vendors called out prices, carts rolled across cobblestone streets, and the air was filled with the mingling smells of fresh bread, roasted coffee, and street food. She walked with purpose, her mind rehearsing a few compositions she hoped to play for the children. The world around her felt vibrant, full of energy, and she was ready to be part of it in a meaningful way. Arriving at the community center, she was greeted by a group of children, their eyes wide with curiosity. Many had never seen a piano up close, let alone someone play it with such skill and emotion. She smiled warmly, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was different from performing for an audience of strangers or critics. These were young minds, eager to learn and absorb. She set her bag down, unpacked her notebook, and began with a simple melody. The children listened intently, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes as they imagined the music. She spoke softly between pieces, explaining how each note and chord could tell a story, how emotion could be expressed without words. The children responded with laughter, questions, and attempts to mimic the melodies she played. She guided them patiently, remembering the teachers and mentors who had shaped her own journey. Hours passed quickly. She moved from piano to keyboard, demonstrating techniques, sharing stories of perseverance and practice, and encouraging the children to explore their own creativity. Each child responded differently, some timidly, some boldly, but all were engaged. She realized that her influence extended beyond her own music. She was planting seeds of confidence, curiosity, and passion. During a short break, she spoke privately with the community center's director. The director had been observing her teaching and expressed gratitude for the time and energy she had given. "You have a gift not just for playing music, but for inspiring others," the director said. "These children will remember today for a long time. You are making a real difference." Her heart swelled with a quiet pride. It was one thing to perform for recognition, but to witness the spark of creativity and excitement in these children was profoundly moving. She had spent years hungry, struggling, and unsure of herself. Now, she was in a position to give something invaluable to others' guidance, inspiration, and the belief that they too could achieve their dreams. Later that afternoon, she packed her belongings and walked to a nearby park. A small piano had been placed there as part of a community initiative, inviting passers-by to play and share music. She sat at the instrument and began to play, letting the melodies flow freely, unrestrained by the expectations of any audience. People stopped to listen, workers on break, joggers, parents with children, and the music created an invisible thread, connecting everyone present. She noticed a young girl sitting on a bench, sketching in a notebook. The girl's eyes were fixed on the piano, absorbing every movement of her hands. It reminded her of herself years ago, observing her father, dreaming of playing and imagining the possibilities. She felt a sense of responsibility and inspiration. Music had changed her life, and she hoped it could touch others in the same way.